By the time the desert swallowed the last line of daylight, Billy the Kid was more shadow than boy, stumbling across the sand with his shirt stuck to his ribs, and that heavy leather bag thumping against his hip like a second heartbeat, every breath tasting of dust and blood, and the last of his strength. He had no horse, no partner, no plan left that hadn't already gone wrong. Only miles of sagebrush, a torn side that refused to stop bleeding, and the memory of 20 men swearing he would not live to see another dawn if the dust devils had anything to say about it. He had been running for 10 days, zigzagging through dry riverbeds and low mesquite, sleeping in snatches underneath rocks that still radiated heat from the sun, always with one hand on his revolver and the other gripping that thick brown bag like his life depended on it. Because in a way it did. Inside was the small iron box he had ripped from Ezra Pike's campfire circle at Black Mesa, the same box those outlaws had taken off an old Irish couple outside Fort Stanton, a box of no real weight in his hands, but crushing in what it meant to him, in what he'd seen scratched across the papers, folded inside. The night wind had teeth, and it bit into his sweat-soaked shirt as he limped along, boots dragging furrows in the sand. But when he lifted his head, he saw something that didn't belong to the desert at all. A pinprick of lamplight, a lonely yellow eye flickering on the horizon, too still and warm to be a campfire, too steady to be lightning in the distance. A cabin, he thought, or maybe he just wanted it to be one. Either way, his feet changed direction before his mind finished the notion. The boy they called Billy the Kid, pulling himself up one more dry hill, as if there were not a price on his head, and 20 angry men behind him, as if he weren't bleeding through his shirt and half lost from thirst. The place appeared all at once, huddled against a low rise, as if it had grown out of the dirt. Rough-hewn cabin, small corral with only ghosts of horses, a pail sitting crooked by the well, clothes on a line barely stirring in the wind. There was something fragile and stubborn about it, like it had no right to stand there, and yet did anyway. The lamplight leaked through a curtained window. Billy knew better than to walk up on any house at night in this country, not in his condition, and not with that bag in his hand. But his tongue felt like leather, and his vision was tunneling at the edges. And for once in his life, he didn't care if whoever lived here knew his name or not, so long as they had water and maybe a scrap of mercy left in them. He stepped onto the porch, the boards creaking beneath his weight, and raised his fist to knock. The door flew open before his knuckles touched the wood. The woman in the doorway couldn't have been much older than 27, but the desert, and whatever life she'd been living, had carved a few years more into the set of her mouth and the tightness around her eyes. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, a few strands stuck with sweat to her temple, and she held a long rifle leveled straight at his chest with hands that did not tremble. Bare feet planted on the boards like she'd held her ground 100 times before this moment. Behind her, Billy caught the brief movement of small shapes and wide eyes before she shifted, blocking the view. "Turn around," she snapped, voice low but sharp as broken glass. "You're not welcome here." Billy lifted his empty hand where she could see it, the leather bag slipping lower on his shoulder. "Ma'am," he rasped. Every word scraped raw in his throat. "I don't mean you or your young ones any harm. I just need some water. Been running near 10 days. Lost my horse. I ain't looking to bring trouble to your door." "Too late," she shot back. "You are trouble. I can see it all over you." Her eyes flicked over him, taking in the torn shirt, the dark stain on his side, the dust caked to his boots and face, the revolver at his hip that he was pointedly not reaching for. "Go, right now. Before my boys and girls see you on my porch and start asking questions I don't want to answer." A small voice spoke up from somewhere behind her skirts, soft and curious. "Mama, he doesn't look bad. He looks tired." The barrel of the rifle did not waver, but the woman's jaw tightened. "Rosie, back," she ordered without turning. "Take your brothers with you, now." The girl didn't move. She slipped her head out from behind her mother's side, a skinny child of about 10, with big dark eyes and freckles dusted across a nose that had seen a lot of sun. She studied Billy the way a foal studies a rattler, wariness and wonder all mixed together. "He's hurt," she said quietly. "Mama, look, his shirt is all red." The woman's gaze dropped to his side, where the blood had soaked through and dried in a stiff, ugly crust. Billy swayed a little, his fingers tightening on the doorframe as the porch seemed to tilt under him. "Just some lead that wanted to stay with me," he forced out, trying to keep his tone light and failing. "It'll be gone in a day or two. I just need—" The word wouldn't come. The desert took it, greedy to the last. "Water," Rosie whispered for him. Her mother hesitated, and that hesitation was all the night needed to press in closer. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote yipped, the sound small and sharp. The woman's eyes narrowed as she peered past Billy into the black, more afraid of what might be behind him than of the half-dead boy in front of her. "Where'd you come from?" she demanded. "And don't you lie to me, I can smell lies." "Black Mesa," Billy said, too tired to invent anything else. "Headed south. Didn't much care where, so long as it was away." Her brows rose at that, a flicker of recognition. She shifted the rifle a fraction. Not down, but not as tight against her shoulder either. "You tied up with anyone?" she asked. "You ride with the Dust Devils? With Pike?" There it was, the name he'd been running from for 10 days. Billy shook his head and winced as the movement tugged at the wound. "No ma'am, Ezra Pike and me, we ain't on the same side of anything anymore. That's the problem." She studied his face, searching for the kind of deceit she'd probably been fed 100 times by men who came to doors like this one, wanting warmth they hadn't earned. Then she asked, voice shifting slightly, "You know of a man they call Rattlesnake Cole?" The name rolled out onto the porch like something that might have venom attached. Even the girl's eyes flinched. Billy blinked at her, honestly lost. "Can't say that I do," he answered. "I've heard of 100 snakes in these parts, ma'am, but not that one." Something in her shoulders eased at that, just a fraction, as if she'd been braced for him to nod. She lowered the rifle a little, but did not put it away. "He's known around here," she said, almost to herself. "Too known." For a heartbeat, a shadow crossed her face, something like old fear and anger tangled together, but then it was gone, and her jaw was firm again. "I'm not lowering this because I trust you," she added, sharply. "I'm lowering it because my girl is right. You look like you'd fall over if I spat on you." "Reckon I might," Billy admitted, because the world was starting to gray at the edges. "I'll be gone by morning. Just help me through the night, and I'll make sure none of whatever's after me sticks to your door." She weighed him with her eyes, then stepped aside with a motion of her chin. "Inside, slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them." He moved past her into the cabin. The warmth of the small single room hitting him like another kind of shock after so many cold nights out, the smell of stew and wood smoke, and something clean, soap or sun-dried clothes, wrapping around him. A boy of about 6, and another smaller one, peered at him from behind a rough table, their hair sticking up in sleep-tossed angles. Rosie slipped around her mother, keeping one hand on the woman's skirt as if she were the one protecting her. "Sit," the mother ordered, nodding to a chair near the hearth. "Don't bleed on my floor more than you have to." "Yes, ma'am," Billy murmured, and sank down, the room spinning once and then twice before it settled. He set the leather bag down carefully by his feet, never letting go of the strap as if someone might snatch it from him even here. The woman moved with brisk competence, setting the rifle within arm's reach on the table, fetching a basin of water that shimmered like something holy in Billy's blurred vision, tearing strips of an old shirt. Up close, her face looked younger, the softness of 27 fighting with the hardness of someone who'd seen too much and been believed too little. "What's your name?" she asked, wetting a cloth. "Henry," he said automatically, then added, "Most folks don't call me that. What do they call you?" "Billy," he answered, and left it at that, though he saw the tiniest flash in her eyes, like she'd heard something around that name before, a campfire story half remembered. Out here, tales traveled faster than riders. She didn't push it. Instead, she knelt beside him, and lifted the edge of his shirt with professional detachment, exhaling softly at the angry wound underneath. The skin puckered and raw where someone had patched him up in a hurry with whiskey and torn saddle blanket. "Whoever did this for you wasn't your enemy," she said. "But they weren't your friend either." "That'd be a fair description of most folks I know," Billy said, a ghost of a smile touching his mouth before it vanished under a hiss as she dabbed at the wound, cleaning out the dust. "Mama, can I talk to him?" Rosie asked, edging closer. "You can listen," her mother replied firmly. "And you can hand me that clean cloth." "That's it." "Yes, ma'am." Rosie obeyed, but her eyes stayed on Billy's face, trying to reconcile the near legend she'd heard around town, a gunfighter barely more than a boy, with the pale, exhausted stranger in her mother's chair. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like someone who'd run as far as he could, and was still thinking of running even as he bled. They fed him afterwards, the mother ladling out more stew into his bowl than she could probably spare, but doing it anyway, watching how he ate, how he never once let his fingers stray close to his gun. When the children pressed near, how his gaze flicked automatically to the window and the door, measuring danger even between spoonfuls. When he reached for his water again, she caught his wrist, her grip strong. "You said you'd been running from Pike," she said. "Why?" Billy swallowed, the memory of firelight and shouting, the chaos at the Dust Devil's camp, flickering behind his eyes. "Because I took something back from him he never should have had," he answered slowly. "Wasn't his to begin with." "What was it?" Her eyes dropped to the leather bag by his chair. He nudged it with his boot, pulling it a little closer. "Instinctive. Nothing that'll matter to you or yours," he said. "Just a box with some papers and a few coins. Old things. They belonged to my family once, got passed into the wrong hands, and I aim to set that right. Pike doesn't take kindly to people touching what he thinks is his, even if he stole it first." She considered that, eyes narrowing. "You a thief, then?" "Depends who you ask," Billy replied. "To Pike, I'm that and worse. To the law, I'm a whole lot meaner than I am to myself." He hesitated, his gaze flicking to Rosie and the boys. "To myself, I'm just someone who's done more wrong than a man ought to, and is trying, at least some days, to do one thing that ain't rotten clear through." The mother studied his face for a long silent moment. Then she let go of his wrist and straightened. "You'll sleep there by the fire," she said. "You leave your gun on that chair, where I can see it. You touch my children in any way they don't like, I will put a bullet in you before you can say another clever word. At first light, you go. No arguing." "Yes, ma'am," Billy said again, and meant it. He unbuckled the holster with slow, visible movements, and set the revolver on the chair, feeling naked without it, then eased down onto the blanket she tossed him. The boys crept closer once their mother turned away, inch by inch until the smaller one, Tommy, spoke up. "Mister?" he whispered. "Are you really Billy the Kid?" The words dropped into the quiet, like small stones into still water. The mother froze with her hand on a shelf, not turning, listening. Billy thought about lying, but the boy's eyes were so big and earnest that somehow it felt like another kind of crime. "Some folks call me that," he admitted softly. Rosie sucked in a breath. "I told you," she whispered to her brothers. Half thrilled, half afraid. "I told you he was someone." "Mama, he's a man who needs sleep more than he needs your chatter." Their mother cut in sharply, turning at last. "All of you bed. Now. Can't we just—" Rosie began. "Now, Rosie." There was steel in that voice that even Billy wouldn't test. The children went, reluctantly, glancing back over their shoulders at the outlaw on their floor. Billy raised a hand in a small sheepish wave that somehow didn't scare them at all. When the last door closed on their little sleeping room, the cabin quieted, the fire settling into a soft red glow. The woman, he realized he didn't know her name, stood there for a moment, rubbing at a spot on her wrist, where old bruises might have been once. "You sleep," she said finally. "I'll keep watch. You don't have to. If there's 20 men looking for you, I absolutely do." A wry, humorless smile tugged at one corner of her mouth. "I won't have survived this long, just to be surprised before dawn, because I was trusting." "You're not trusting," Billy murmured, eyes already heavy. "You're kind." They're different things." She didn't answer, but he thought he saw something flicker in her gaze at that. Some long dormant ember briefly stirred. When sleep came for him, it did it fast, like a sack over the head, and for the first time in days he slept without jerking awake at every sound. It wasn't long. Dawn hadn't even fully crawled over the horizon when the thunder of hooves tore through the morning like a storm. The first thing Billy knew of it was the way the floor shook under him, and the shouting of a voice he didn't recognize. The words carried on dust that seeped in through the cracks. He was on his feet before his eyes opened fully, one hand reaching for a gun that was not at his hip, the other already grabbing for the leather bag. The mother was at the window, peering out from one side of the curtain, the rifle in her hands. "Stay down," she hissed, without looking back. Billy ignored that, limping to her side to steal a glance. The sight turned his blood to ice. More than 20 men crowded the little yard in front of the cabin, their horses restless, flanks lathered, dust devils. He recognized the red bandanas some of them favored, the way they carried themselves like men who believed the world owed them something, and they'd take it by force. At their head sat Ezra Pike, tall in the saddle, his coat dusty, but his hat still at that arrogant angle. Billy knew too well. Ezra's eyes were on the cabin door, cold and hungry. "Clara," he called, and the name slid into Billy's mind like a puzzle piece, snapping into place. So that's what she was called. "Miss Clara, we're looking for a particular rattler, and we hear he might have slipped this way. We're feeling generous. Come on out and talk." Clara's jaw clenched so tight Billy could almost hear her teeth grind. She cut him a sideways glance. "You stay back," she ordered. "If they see you, there won't be any talking." "Clara," Billy repeated softly, as if tasting the name. It fit her, strong and simple and stubborn. He eased away from the window, heart pounding hard enough to jostle the wound in his side, and crouched by the hearth where the shadows were thickest, the leather bag clutched to his chest. Rosie and her brothers huddled in the doorway of their little room, faces pale. Clara took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped out onto the porch, the rifle cradled in her arms, but not pointed. The sunlight hit her hair and turned the loose wisps into a kind of halo around a face that did not look scared so much as tired of being threatened. Billy edged closer to the window, just enough to hear. "Morning," Clara called, her voice steady. "You boys sure know how to wake a woman up." A chuckle rippled through the men, mean and appreciative. Ezra smiled, all teeth. "Sorry for the ruckus, ma'am," he said, the false politeness in his drawl slick as oil. "We're hunting us a thief, and when a man steals from the dust devils, we take it personal." "Dust devils," she said mildly. "I thought as much when I saw all that dust and no manners." A few riders shifted, glancing at each other. Ezra's smile didn't falter, but his eyes cooled. "We've been tracking Billy the Kid," he went on, ignoring the jab. "You might have heard of him. Killed more men than years he's been alive, some say. Thin fella, boy's face, eyes like he's already halfway in the grave. Took something from me, back at Black Mesa, that don't belong to him. You seen a stranger like that?" Inside, Billy held his breath. The bounty posters Ezra had bragged about flashed in his mind, those ugly caricatures of his own face nailed to saloon walls. A price high enough to tempt almost anyone who'd ever been hungry. "You offering something for him?" Clara asked, and Billy's stomach dropped even as he understood why she asked it. Ezra perked up. "We are," he said warmly. "A lot of something. Enough to fix that roof of yours, and then some. Enough to buy you out of whatever trouble you got stuck in with that snake of an ex-husband, I'd wager." The men chuckled again. Clara's posture changed almost imperceptibly at the mention of rattlesnake coal. A flinch she swallowed down. "That's so," she said. "Name your amount then." Ezra did. It was high. Billy saw Clara's back stiffen at the number, could almost feel the quick calculation in her head, what that money would mean for her, and the kids, how far it could carry them from here. He hated Ezra in that moment, more than he had under the muzzle flashes at Black Mesa, because this was a different kind of bullet, aimed straight at the heart of the only person who'd shown him kindness in weeks. "And if I don't help you?" Clara asked. Ezra's smile thinned. "Then we search anyway," he said. "One way is friendly, the other ain't." I don't like being unfriendly with ladies and children, but I like being robbed even less. So I'll ask you one more time, Miss Clara. Have you seen Billy the Kid? Inside, two of the riders were no longer in front of the cabin. Billy felt his skin crawl and shifted to another crack in the boards, just in time to see them ghosting down either side of the house, leading their horses quietly, eyes on the windows. They moved like men who'd done this before. Surround, listen, rush in. One of them paused near the back wall, frowning. Billy realized with a cold jolt that the sound of his own ragged breathing might betray him. Then came the worst of it. Tommy, too scared to stay silent, let out a tiny whimper from the doorway inside. One of the men outside tilted his head, listening, and then stepped to the nearest window, flattening himself against the wall as he peered in. Billy dropped down, heart in his throat. The rider backed away and signaled to Ezra. "There's someone inside," he called. The laughter stopped. Ezra's eyes sharpened. He turned back to Clara, all charm gone. "You hiding something, darling?" he asked softly. "I hear more than just your pups in there. You call whoever's in that house out here right now, or we'll come in and we won't come in gentle." Billy's hand clenched on the strap of the bag. This was it. He pushed himself up, ready to fling open the door and step out, to draw all that fury onto himself and away from the little family, even if it meant dying with his boots in the doorway. Before he could move, he heard his own voice say, low and urgent, "If you have to give me up to save your children, then you do it. Don't you think twice." Clara didn't look back at him. She stood very still for one heartbeat, then two, as if listening to something inside herself. For a moment Billy could see the fork in her road as clearly as if it were laid out on the floorboards. Money and safety on one side, danger and stubbornness, and some outlaw she'd met only hours ago on the other. When she spoke, her choice came out in a single sharp breath. "Children," she called, loud enough for Ezra and his men to hear, "come out here this instant." Rosie and the boys filed onto the porch, small and scruffy, and blinking into the daylight. There was no outlaw behind them, no extra shadows in the doorway. Ezra's eyes flicked over their faces, counting. He frowned. "That all of them?" he asked. "That's all of mine," Clara said. "And as for your Billy, I've never seen him. A skinny boy with a gun is hardly a rare thing in this territory." "You sure about that?" he pressed. "Because I'd hate to think you were lying to me for some wanted thief, when you could be earning your way out of this dust bowl." "I'm sure about a great many things," she replied, coolly. "One of them is that you and your men are wearing out your welcome. This is my land, my home. Unless you plan on shooting a woman in front of her children for sport, you can turn those horses around and hunt your ghost somewhere else." The yard went very quiet. Billy could hear the creak of leather, the soft snort of a horse. Ezra's face shifted, some darker thought passing across it. Then he laughed, the sound brittle. "You're braver than most, Clara," he said. "Or more foolish. It's impressive your husband managed to catch himself a woman like you. Didn't think Rattlesnake Cole had it in him." "Don't you mention my ex-husband on my land," she snapped. The words edged with something fierce and aching. "Now you boys finished with your questions, because my porch is getting mighty crowded." Ezra looked at her a long moment, weighing what he thought he knew of her against what he saw now. Finally he tipped his hat. "Far be it from me to argue with a lady," he said. "We're moving on. But if I find out you lied to me, Clara, I'll come back, and next time I won't knock." "You didn't knock this time," she replied. He chuckled again, signaled to his men, and the dust devils wheeled their horses, the thunder of hooves receding slowly into the distance. Clara stood on the porch until the last dust cloud faded, the rifle hanging loose at her side. Only then did her shoulders drop. She turned back into the house, her eyes locking onto Billy's, where he hovered just beyond the doorframe. "Don't thank me," she said, before he could speak. "Don't you dare." He shut his mouth, the gratitude sticking like dry bread. She stepped inside, shutting the door behind her, the latch clicking like a gun being cocked. "You brought 20-odd men to my doorstep," she went on, voice low and shaking, not from fear but from anger. "You brought the dust devils, and now they know I lied to them. You stole something from Ezra Pike, and he's not just gonna forget that. You think he won't remember my face when he doesn't find you?"
You think he won't come back around asking questions? Maybe next time with a match. Billy absorbed each word like another blow. I told you, he said quietly. If you needed to, you could have handed me over. And you think I could sleep, knowing I sold a man to them? She shot back. I've done enough things in this life I can't scrub off. I won't add that to the list. She paced once across the small room, then stopped and fixed him with a gaze that pinned him to the spot. You're going to tell me everything, she said. Why Pike wants you dead, what's in that bag, and why in God's name, Rattlesnake Cole's old enemies are suddenly tangling with his. Rattlesnake Cole is your ex-husband, Billy said slowly, putting pieces together. And he's tangled up with Pike? Her mouth twisted. This territory's small and mean, she said. Everybody's tangled with everybody else, one way or another. Now talk. So he did. Billy told her about Black Mesa, about how he'd slipped into the Dust Devil's camp under cloud cover, half ghost and half gambling man, fingers steady even as his heart hammered. He talked about the iron box by Ezra's boot, how he'd seen the old Irishman's widow weeping outside the ruins of her wagon, clutching at her apron, as she told anyone who'd listen, that those men had taken not just her money, but the last letters her sister had sent from back east. He talked about how he'd watched Pike toss that same box around like it was trash, using it to prop up a coffee pot. I wasn't looking to be a hero, Billy said. I was looking for one thing that wasn't selfish. I thought I'd take the box, ride it back to her, and be gone before Pike even knew it was missing. But when I pried it open later, after I got clear, he shifted, opening the leather bag just enough to draw out the iron box, the metal scarred and ugly. Clara watched closely, but did not reach for it. Billy flipped the lid and pulled out a folded paper, yellowed and creased. I found this, he said, smoothing it as best he could with trembling fingers. Even now, the sight of his family name there did something to his chest he didn't know how to name. It's a deed. To land along a river bend, north of here, signed to my uncle, Sean McCarty. I didn't even know he'd land out this way. And there were letters from my ma Catherine, addressed to him, talking about me and my brother when we were little. Pike must have taken this off my uncle, or whoever held it after him. I recognized her hand, his voice roughened. So it wasn't just a good deed anymore, it was mine. Or at least, it was my blood's. Clara absorbed that, her eyes flicking over the cramped ink. And the coins? She asked. Payment owed, Billy answered. Or maybe just Pike's teeth marks on whatever he takes. Either way, he wanted it back. I'd barely gotten clear of their camp when one of his men woke up enough to notice the box was gone. Shots shouting. I hit one of them. Thought that was that. Then I saw the stable boy. The cabin was very quiet. The only sound was the soft crackle of the fire. He couldn't have been older than 15, Billy murmured, staring at a knot in the floor. He stepped out of the shadows with a lantern, just as a bullet ricocheted. Might have been mine. Might have been one of theirs. Doesn't much matter to him now. He dropped without a sound. I didn't go back to check. I just ran. Been running ever since. When he finally looked up, Clara's eyes were on him. Something like sorrow there. Not pity. He suspected she had none left, but a recognition of how wrong the world could twist. So that's who you are, she said quietly. A boy with too many ghosts, and not enough sense to leave other people's trouble alone. He gave a humorless half laugh. You make it sound worse than I do in my own head. Good, she replied. Maybe you'll start believing me. Now listen, Billy the Kid. I meant what I said. You're leaving. You've got enough strength back to walk, and there's still morning shade to travel in. You made the Dust Devils look my way. I won't have you bringing more hell down on my children. Her words were firm, but there was a crack in them now. Hairline small but there. He heard it. Give me until noon, he said softly. If Pike's still close, me walking out that door is like me walking into his gun. Let me sit out the worst of the sun. Give me an hour, 2, then I'm gone, and you never have to think about me again. She hesitated. Behind her, Rosie clung to the doorframe, listening, her face drawn. Mama, Rosie said, almost inaudible. It's not his fault the bad men came. They come anyway, they always do.
Clara closed her eyes briefly, the truth of that digging deeper than any outlaw's story. When she opened them, she nodded. Kurt, you have half an hour, she said. No more. I'll go fetch wood while there's light. The boys will help me. Rosie, you stay and make sure our guest doesn't fall over. Yes, ma'am, Rosie said quickly. Too quickly, hope rushing into her voice. Clara shot Billy one last warning look, then stepped out, calling the boys to her. The cabin exhaled when the door closed. For a moment, Billy and Rosie just looked at each other. Then she darted forward, sitting crisscross on the floor near him. "I knew you weren't bad," she said. "Not the way they say. You don't know enough about me to know that," Billy replied tiredly. "I know you didn't let them take you when they wanted to," she answered. "And you didn't beg Mama to save you. That's something. Your mama doesn't seem like the kind of woman a man can beg anything from," Billy said. "That's something too." Rosie smiled a little at that, glancing toward the door as if checking her mother hadn't heard. They talked in low voices as the minutes crept by, the girl asking questions with the bluntness only a child had. Did he really kill 10 men? 20? Did he ever get scared? What was it like in Lincoln? And was the sky there the same? Billy, half amused and half pained by her curiosity, answered some and deflected others, softening the uglier edges, not wanting to put nightmares in her head. He told her instead about how the desert looked just before sunrise, about the way herons lifted off from riverbanks near Fort Sumner, about his mother's laugh and how he still heard it sometimes when the wind moved just right. "So you were loved," Rosie said, like she hadn't been sure. "Once," he replied. "That matters," she said. He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything at all. The half hour stretched, turned into something wider as Clara kept her boys busy just out of sight, chopping at scrub branches and checking the small chicken coop, maybe taking longer on purpose, maybe giving him more time without admitting it. Billy's muscles loosened, his eyelids dipped. For a few heartbeats, he almost believed he could stay, just a tired stranger taking shelter with a small family, not the ghost they painted on wanted posters. Then the sound came again. Hooves, but different this time. Heavier, fewer of them, but bolder, like whoever rode them knew they owned whatever they approached. Billy's head snapped up. Rosie went still, her face bleaching white. "Pike's back?" Billy asked, hand going instinctively toward where his gun should have been before he remembered. "No," Rosie whispered, her voice catching. "It's worse. It's my father." The name he hadn't known, the code name Clara had spat out to him earlier, suddenly carried more weight than any bounty, Rattlesnake Cole. Billy's brows pulled together. "I thought," he didn't finish, because in the way they'd spoken of the man, in the empty space at their table where a father might have sat, he'd assumed Cole was dead, or gone for good. Rosie swallowed. "He was supposed to be," she said. "Mama said we were rid of him when she came out here. But snakes don't die easy." Outside, a man's voice cracked across the yard like a whip. "Clara," he roared. "Get your witch hide out here." Tommy and the younger boy, Ben, flinched and pressed close together in the doorway, eyes wide with a fear older than they were. Billy pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the protest in his side. "Go to the back," he told the children. "Stay low. Don't move unless your mama or I come for you." Rosie shook her head, frozen. "He'll be mad if we hide," she whispered. "He gets madder. I don't give a damn how mad he gets," Billy said. More harshly than he meant, but it snapped something in her locked-up muscles. "You hear me? You don't belong to his anger." She stared at him, then grabbed her brother's hands and dragged them toward the small pantry, shoving them inside, her own skinny shoulders squared as if she could hold the whole house up. Billy limped to the window. Rattlesnake Cole Merrick, Billy guessed that had been his last name once, sat his horse like he'd been born there, a long, lanky man in a battered duster, his beard patchy, but his eyes sharp and mean, coiled with something ugly that simmered below his skin. 3 other men lounged behind him, guns at their hips, watching the cabin with lazy predator interest. Clara stood in front of the porch, her hands empty now, but her spine unbent, the rifle nowhere in sight, probably leaning just inside the door, where she could grab it if she had half a heartbeat. "You weren't invited," she said. Her voice was even, but Billy could hear the tremor underneath, the way old fear had dug its claws into her nerves. "You never invited me to anything," Cole sneered, swinging down from his horse and stalking closer. "They forced you on me, remember? Little desert witch in a borrowed dress, promised to me to settle a debt. I should have known you'd bring ruin on me, like you bring it on everything. You did that all by yourself, she answered. You and that patch of poison you call a heart. His face darkened, but he kept coming. I heard the dust devils paid you a visit, he said, voice dropping low and cruel. You entertaining rival gangs now? You invite them in for stew, warm their beds like you never warmed mine. One of his men snickered. Clara's cheeks flushed, more with fury than embarrassment. They showed up with guns, she said. Like you always do. I sent them on their way. I didn't owe them anything, same as I don't owe you. You owe me everything, he snarled, closing the distance in 2 long strides. I gave you a roof when you were nothing. I took you in when no one else would. And how do you repay me? You run off with my brats, steal my land and hole up out here like some holy saint. He leaned in, breath hot on her face. You're nothing. You always were. I should have listened when they said you were a curse, a monster in pretty skin. Clara's hands curled into fists at her sides. She stayed silent, the words raining down on her like stones, but her eyes flicked once toward the pantry where the children hid, and that was enough. Cole saw it. He smirked. And those weak little pups you whelped, he went on loudly, turning so his men could hear. Unfit to carry my name. Hiding behind your skirts. Not a drop of my blood in them, from the way they cower. They're a shame, just like their witch of a mother. Something broke then, not in Clara, but in whatever leash she'd kept on herself. You don't get to talk about them, she snapped, voice shaking with rage. Now, you don't get to talk about children you terrorized, about a wife you beat because a card game didn't go your way, about a house you turned into a hell. You forfeited that when you picked the bottle and the gang over us. He blinked, surprised at the fire he'd stoked, then his mouth twisted, and he struck her, the back of his hand connecting with her cheek so hard she went sprawling into the dirt. The sound of it cracked through Billy's skull like a shot. He didn't remember deciding to move. 1 second he was at the window. The next he was bursting through the door, pain screaming up his side. The world narrowing to the sight of Cole standing over Clara, his boot lifting, as if to push her back down. Hey, Billy said, his voice low and lethal. Cole turned, irritated, and that was the last free breath he got. Billy hit him like a storm rolling off the mountains, all fury and no balance, grabbing the man by the front of his coat and driving him backward. They crashed into one of the fence posts, wood splintering. Cole swung wildly, fists connecting with Billy's ribs, but pain had already taken up all the space there, and Billy's own fists answered, years of bar fights and back alley scrapes informing every blow. You like hitting someone who can't hit back, Billy snarled, punctuating each word with a fist. You think that makes you a man? For beating on a woman who kept your children alive while you pissed away their food. Cole spat blood, eyes wild. Who the hell are you? Just someone who's sick of men like you, Billy growled, and threw him into the dust at Clara's feet. Cole's hand went for his gun, but before he could clear leather, Clara's foot came down hard on his wrist, pinning it. She'd already scrambled up, hair askew, cheek blooming with a red mark. There was murder in her eyes, murder and something long suppressed clawing free. You leave, she said, voice low and deadly. You take your dogs and you ride away from here. You don't come back, not ever. One of Cole's men, realizing their leader might actually lose this, finally stirred. Boss, he called, uncertainly, hand going to his own gun. You need. Billy turned, breathing hard, and met the man's eyes. Cole's other 2 riders stiffened, startled at how quickly the situation had shifted. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then everything happened at once. Guns cleared holsters, boots dug into the dirt, and the small front yard of Clara's cabin erupted into a mess of fists, shots, and curses. Billy dove toward the nearest rider as the man's revolver came up, the shot going wild into the sky as they collided. He was woozy with pain, slower than he should have been, and the second man swung the butt of his gun into Billy's shoulder, sending lightning down his arm. Billy staggered, vision doubling. The third man leveled his weapon at Billy's chest, finger tightening on the trigger. No! Rosie's scream sliced through the air as she burst from the doorway. drawn by the sound of her mother hitting the ground. Clara, still holding Cole's wrist under her boot, twisted, eyes spotting the rifle just inside the door, where she'd left it after the dust devil's visit. In one smooth, desperate motion, she stooped, snatched it up, and fired from the hip. The bullet caught the gunman's hand, not his heart, blowing the weapon out of his grip in a spray of splinters and blood. He howled, clutching his wrist. The second man, startled, turned toward Clara with a snarl. Billy saw an opening and took it, slamming his shoulder into the rider's knees, sending them both sprawling. The gun flew. Dust flew. Someone cursed in Spanish. When the chaos settled enough to see, one of Cole's men was wounded and scrambling toward his horse. Another was out cold in the dirt, and the third was hauling Cole up by the arm, shouting that they had to go now, that this wasn't worth dying over. Cole, dazed and bleeding from a cut above his eye, glared at Billy with a hatred that felt like a promise. "You're dead," he spat. "You and your little saint here, I'll see you all in the ground." "You've been promising people their graves for years," Clara snapped, breathing hard. "Maybe you should start worrying about your own." He lunged as if to go for her again, but his man yanked him back, slamming him against the saddle, until he had no choice but to grab hold or fall. They mounted, turned, and rode off in a ragged cluster, one of them shouting curses over his shoulder, the hooves of their horses kicking up a fresh cloud of dust that stung Billy's eyes. When they were finally gone, the yard fell quiet, except for the ragged breathing of four people, trying to remember how to be still. Clara turned on Billy then, fury shaking her more than fear had. "What did you do?" she demanded, voice raw. "What did you just do?" He blinked, taken aback. "I stopped him from." "You lit a fuse," she cut in. "You humiliated him in front of his men, on land he thinks belongs to him. You think Pike was bad? Cole is worse. Now he's got a reason to come after me that doesn't even have your face on it. He'll kill me just to get his pride back, and he'll kill you for sport. You don't know what you've brought down on us." "I know what I saw," Billy shot back, anger flaring in him too, not at her, but at the world that put that bruise on her cheek. "I saw a man hit a woman who'd fed my empty belly. I saw him talk about his own children like they were trash. You think I'm the kind of man who can stand on a porch and watch that? I think you're the kind of man who doesn't realize other people have to live with the mess he leaves behind," she retorted. "You ride away, Billy, with your ghosts and your guns, and we're still here when the dust settles, taking the blows meant for you." The words hit home hard enough that he flinched. For a long taut moment they just stared at each other as Rosie and the boys clung to their mother's skirt, eyes darting between them. Then Billy straightened, wincing. "You're right," he said quietly. "You're right. I've been leaving messes my whole life, riding on before the worst of it catches up. But this time, I'm staying. As long as there's breath in me, and a bullet left, I ain't letting that man or Pike lay a hand on you or your children without going through me first." Clara's lips parted, a protest on them, but he barreled on. "You could have sold me to Pike, but you didn't," he said. "You took a wound aimed at me when you stepped in front of Cole's boot. I don't forget debts like that. You don't have to like that. I'm here. You don't have to trust me. But you're not alone in this fight anymore." Silence stretched, the morning sun growing hotter on their faces. Finally, Clara looked away, up at the sky, then back at him. Whatever she saw in his eyes, it eased something in her. The hard line of her shoulders softened, just a little. "You're a fool," she murmured. "Maybe the biggest one I've ever let onto this porch." "Wouldn't be the first time I heard that," he replied, trying for a smile, and almost making it. "But you're stuck with me now," she exhaled, a half laugh, half sigh. "God help us," she said. "Because I don't think anyone else will." The hours that followed were a strange, fragile thing, stitched together out of necessity, and the thin thread of trust. Clara bandaged Billy's new bruises alongside his old wound, her fingers surprisingly gentle against his skin. He cleaned the cut on her cheek with water from the basin, his touch feather light, anger tightening his jaw. Each time she flinched, Rosie watched them with sharp eyes, seeing something grow between them that neither adult dared name yet. The boys stayed close, shaken but resilient in that way. Children had, already whispering among themselves about how Billy had flown out the door like some storybook hero, even if he himself felt anything but. As the sun slid toward afternoon, the air thickened with heat, and the heavy sense that something was coming. They all felt it. Rattlesnake Cole wouldn't lick his wounds in peace. Men like him didn't know how. Sure enough, somewhere out there on the hardpan, he was doing exactly what Clara feared, sitting with Ezra Pike, face flushed with fury and shame, telling the dust devils everything he knew about the woman who'd defied them both, and the outlaw who'd humiliated him at her side. In a dingy saloon, 40 miles away, over spilled whiskey and the promise of shared revenge, an alliance was struck. "You say he's holed up at your ex's cabin," Ezra drawled, rolling a cigarette between his fingers. "You lead us there, Cole, and I'll put the kid in the ground. You can have the woman. Do what you want with her." Cole's mouth twisted. "I don't want her," he snarled, though his eyes said something fouler. "I want her gone. I want that land back. That deed he took from you." "You know about that?" Ezra interjected, attention sharpening. "I know every scrap of paper that's passed between men around here," Cole said. "That land was never his uncle's to begin with. It was mine once, on paper at least, until some banker decided to shuffle things around. When I married her, it was to keep it all from sliding into someone else's hands. When she ran, she stole more than my pride." Ezra smiled slowly. "Then this is simple," he said. "We get the kid. We get my box back. We wipe your slate clean and plant our flag on that little homestead. Good water out there, from what I recall. A fine place to make sure folks remember who runs this stretch." They sealed it with liquor and hate, then mounted up with their combined men, a storm on the move. Back at the cabin, Billy felt the pressure before he heard it, like the air itself was holding its breath. He leaned against the doorframe, watching Clara stack wood by the side of the house, Rosie lurking nearby, with a bucket in her hands, like she meant to help even if she was mostly just hovering. "You've thought about leaving this place?" he asked quietly, when she came close enough to hear. The boys chasing a scrawny chicken in the yard, as if nothing had changed. She shrugged, the movement tight. "Every day," she said, "and every day I look at how far it is to the nearest town with 3 children on foot, and I stay. This land may not be kind, but at least it's mine." He hesitated. "About that," he said, and for the first time he told her what exactly the deed in his bag said. How the river bend described there matched the one not far from her well. How his blood and Cole's had been caught in the same web of greedy men reshuffling land on paper while people bled over it in the dirt. For a second he thought she might slap him for the cruel joke of it, for arriving half dead on the porch of a woman whose home his scrap of paper claimed. Instead, Clara just stared at him, then laughed, a dry, disbelieving sound. "Of course," she said. "Of course the world would be that twisted. Of all the lost boys in all this territory, it's the one with claim to my house that stumbles in." "I don't want it," Billy said quickly. "Not like that. Not if taking it means putting you and the kids in the dust. I thought you should know." She searched his face, looking for the greed she'd seen in so many others. She didn't find it. What she saw instead was something like shame, and something like resolve. "Then what do you want?" she asked quietly. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away toward the horizon where the sky was starting to bruise with evening. "I want you safe," he said, finally. "Safer than anyone's ever bothered to make me. That's all I know how to say." The simplicity of it hit her harder than any fancy promise might have. For a heartbeat, the space between them seemed to narrow, the air humming with everything neither of them said. Then Rosie's voice cut in, clear and sure. "I want that too," she announced. "Mama safe, my brother's safe, and you." Billy blinked at her. "Me?" "Yes," she said firmly. "'Cause if you die, who's going to stand in the doorway when bad men come? Mama says we have to learn to do it ourselves, but I'm not tall enough yet." "You will be," Clara said, a faint smile tugging at her lips, despite everything. "But not today, Rosie." The moment broke as the first faint echo of hooves rolled in from the distance, farther off this time, but more numerous. Billy's spine straightened. "They're coming," he said. Clara stiffened. "Pike and Cole, if I had to guess," he replied. "They'll come together now. Men like that, they only put hate aside when there's profit in it." What do we do? Rosie whispered. We survive, Clara said, her voice suddenly so calm it sent a shiver through Billy. Same as we always have. But this time we fight back. They moved fast, because there was nothing else to do. Clara hustled the children to a narrow ditch behind the cabin, half hidden by brush, where she and Rosie had once dug in a fit of paranoia after one of Cole's early rages, a place to hide if he came home particularly mean. You stay here, she said, kneeling so she could look each child in the eye. You don't move, no matter what you hear. Not until I come for you. Not Billy, not anyone else, me. But Mama, Tommy began. No, she said, and kissed his forehead with a fierceness that bordered on desperation. I need you to live. That's your job. She pressed the same kiss to Rosie's hair, her hand lingering a heartbeat longer on her daughter's cheek. You're the oldest, she said softly. You keep them quiet, you keep them breathing. That's more important than anything happening up there, you hear? Rosie nodded, chin trembling, but eyes steady. I hear. Billy watched, a strange ache in his chest, then handed Rosie his spare revolver, the one he almost never lent out. Her eyes widened. I can't. You can hold it and not use it unless there's no other way, he said. Just having it might make the difference. You know how to aim? Not really, she admitted. Good, he said. Then maybe you won't be tempted to try. She snorted despite herself, then clutched the weapon close. The hooves were louder now, the rhythm becoming clear. Many horses, enough to shake the ground under their knees. Clara and Billy scrambled back to the house, dragging what furniture they could in front of windows, setting up a crude barricade. He checked his gun, the weight of it, a familiar comfort, then glanced at her. Last chance to run, he said. All of us. Slip out the back, cut across the arroyo, make for the canyon. They'll burn the cabin, but you'll be alive, and be hunted from one end of the territory to the other, with 3 children, and no shelter, she replied. No, this is my line in the sand. I'm tired of running. Besides, you said you'd stand with me. You going back on your word now? Not a chance, he said, and there was something like pride in the way he said it. The dust devils and Cole's men arrived like a storm cloud spilling over the horizon, dark and numerous. They fanned out in a semicircle around the cabin, more men than before, their guns glinting in the dying light. Ezra Pike rode forward alone, Cole a little behind him, a bandage on his head, and a murderous glare fixed firmly on the house. Clara, Ezra called, his voice booming. You lied to me this morning. I don't like being lied to. Get in line, she muttered, then stepped up to the window where she could be heard, but not seen easily. Seemed necessary, she called back. You brought a lot of guns for one skinny boy. He's worth every one of them, Ezra replied. You've got something else that belongs to me besides the kid. An iron box, papers, money. Give me both, and maybe I'll let you and your brats walk away. Cole's voice sliced in, bitter and sharp. She doesn't get to walk away, he said. She stole from me long before the kid stole from you. This is my land, Pike, my woman, you promised. Ezra glanced back with mild irritation. We'll divide the spoils when I'm done, he said. Don't get ahead of yourself. Billy felt Clara tense at his side. You hear that? He murmured. According to them, you belong to 2 different devils. I belong to myself, she hissed. And to these children, no one else. Something hot and wild sparked in her gaze, and Billy, against all common sense, felt something like fierceness answering it in his own chest. Ezra's voice came again. Last offer, Clara. Send out the kid in the bag, and I'll tell my boys to lower their guns. If you don't, well, you know what happens when a house catches fire this far from help. Billy's fingers tightened on the bag's strap. For a heartbeat, he thought of stepping outside, walking into that ring of guns with his hands high, letting it all end here so, at least, the woman and children behind him could live. He'd cheated the hangman and the law plenty of times. Maybe this was simply where the road ran out. Then he felt Clara's hand on his arm, strong and warm. Don't you dare, she said, reading his thoughts. You walk out there, they'll shoot you, and still burn my house, just to prove they can. There's no bargain here. He looked at her, at the bruise darkening her cheek, at the small silver scars on her forearms that told their own quiet story of past nights. He thought of Rosie's small fingers closing around his revolver. He thought of his mother's letters, the ones in his bag, her words about trying to raise a good boy in a bad world. Something settled inside him then, a decision as heavy and clear as a loaded gun. "Ezra," he shouted, stepping closer to the doorway so his voice carried. "You want your box?" A murmur ran through the men outside. Ezra sat up straighter in his saddle. "Billy," he crowed. "There you are. Come on out, and we can settle this face to face, like men." "You had 20 men with you at Black Mesa," Billy said. "That's not how men settle anything. But you're right about one thing. This box has caused more trouble than it's worth." Before Clara could stop him, he pulled the iron box from the bag and stepped onto the porch, just far enough that everyone could see him, the sunset painting him in blood and gold. He could feel Clara at his back, the rifle a presence like another beating heart. A shout went up as the men recognized him. Some of Cole's riders muttering about the bounty, greed lighting their eyes. Ezra's face twisted into a grin. "Don't take another step, kid," he warned. "I got 20 rifles pointed at you that'd love to punch holes in that legend of yours." Billy ignored him. He held up the iron box high, letting the last of the sun glint off it. "This what you want?" he called. "Enough for you to sell what's left of your soul to a rattlesnake." "That's mine," Ezra snapped. "It's what I took. That makes it mine." "Then I guess it's time you lost it," Billy said. And before anyone could move, he turned and hurled the box into the small cooking fire burning in a metal ring just off the porch. The iron hit the coals with a dull clang, the lid popping open from the force. Papers fluttered, caught, and began to blacken at the edges as the flames licked hungrily up them. The deed curled, ink twisting, then burst into a brief, fierce glow before turning to ash. For a heartbeat, everyone was too stunned to react. Then Ezra's face went purple. "You little bastard," he roared. "You just burned what was mine." "You burned a lot of things that weren't yours over the years," Billy replied, his voice shaking but steady enough. "Consider us even." Cole laughed once, harsh and disbelieving. "You just burned your own claim too, boy," he said. "That land was your uncle's, they say. You set fire to your own inheritance." Billy glanced back at Clara, at the small cabin, the yard the kids played in, the worn path to the well. "Maybe land shouldn't belong to the men who can afford the ink," he said. "Maybe it belongs to the ones who bled on it and kept children alive on it. Paper never did me any favors anyway." Something like awe flickered in Clara's eyes then, unexpected and deep. Ezra had no such softness in him. He jerked his hand up. "Kill him," he snarled. The world narrowed to gunshots. Clara yanked Billy back inside as the first bullets tore into the porch, splintering wood where he'd stood a heartbeat before. They dove behind the rough table, the leather bag between them, the air filling with dust and smoke. Glass shattered as windows broke. Ezra's men whooped, firing at whatever moved. Billy returned fire in short, precise bursts, the recoil jolting his sore shoulder, drawing curses and cries as a few of the attackers found themselves suddenly on the wrong end of their own game. Clara shot too, calmer than most men Billy had seen in a fight. Her breaths measured, her aim careful. He saw one of Cole's men rear back, clutching his arm, another stumble and drop his gun, as a bullet from inside the cabin knocked it from his hand. "You ever done this before?" Billy shouted over the noise, ejecting spent shells. "Once or twice," she yelled back, eyes blazing. "Mostly with him. Not like this." "You're a natural," he said. "You're insane," she retorted. But there was a spark at the corner of her mouth that might almost have been a smile. Outside, Ezra bellowed orders, trying to organize his chaos. "Flank him," he shouted. "Get to the back. Burn him out if you have to." Flames, Billy thought. Of course, that was how men like Ezra won when bullets took too long. He heard the thunk of something hitting the cabin wall, smelled the first oily smoke of lamp fuel. "They're going to light it," he said grimly. Clara's jaw clenched. "Let them try," she answered. "This house has stood through worse than a few cowards with matches." In the ditch behind the house, Rosie heard the shots and the shouted orders. Her brothers pressed close on either side. She heard the heavier thud of someone scrambling up to the back wall, the scratch of boots on wood. Peeking through the weeds, she saw him. Her father, Rattlesnake Cole, dragging himself along a line of barrels, a torch in one hand, his face twisted in pain and fury. His leg had stiffened, his movements jerky, but the hate in him dragged him onward. He knew every inch of this place. He knew the weak spots. He also knew where his children might be hiding. Rosie's heart hammered so hard she thought it might leap out of her chest. She tightened her grip on Billy's revolver, the metal almost too big for her small hand. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, "Not until I come for you," but Billy's words were there too. "You don't belong to his anger." Cole paused at the corner of the cabin, glancing out toward the wide dark where the ditch lay. His eyes narrowed, sweeping over the scrub. For a second, they met Rosie's. She froze, caught like a rabbit in a snare. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He shifted his weight, turning toward them. Rosie didn't think. She scrambled out of the ditch, gun shaking in her hand, and planted herself between him and her brothers. "Don't come any closer," she said. Her voice cracked but didn't break. Cole stopped, startled, then laughed. "You going to shoot me, girl?" he taunted. "Your own daddy." "You're not my daddy," she said, and the certainty in her tone shook him more than the gun did. "You never were." He took another step. "You don't have the guts." Her hand steadied around the grip. She thought of all the nights she'd heard him yelling, of her mother's slumped shoulders, of her brothers hiding under the bed. She thought of Billy throwing himself into fists meant for someone else. She aimed not at his chest, but at the torch in his hand. The gun kicked like a mule, almost knocking her over, but the shot did exactly what she'd hoped, and barely dared to believe it could do. It hit the torch, sending it flying. The flame sputtered and died in the dirt. Cole stared at his empty hand, then at his daughter, shock and a strange, wounded pride warring in his eyes. "You little witch," he whispered. "You really are hers." Before he could lunge, a shout rang from the front as one of Ezra's men toppled, drawing Cole's attention back to the main fight. He cursed, grabbed for his gun, and limped toward the corner, intending to come through the back door and catch Clara and Billy from behind. Rosie dove back into the ditch, dragging her brothers down just as bullets chewed up the dirt where she'd been standing. Back inside, the world was shrinking to heat and noise. Smoke curled along the ceiling, making Billy's eyes water. Through a gap in the furniture, he saw two men creeping toward the side window, torches ready. He fired twice, his bullets finding their marks well enough to send the torches dropping uselessly into the dust. The men howled, scrambling back. "We can't hold like this forever," Clara coughed. "They've got numbers. They've also got egos," Billy rasped. "Men like Ezra and Cole, they don't like dying for each other. We split 'em, we might live through this." "How?" she demanded. He didn't get a chance to answer. The back door, the one they rarely used, exploded inward with a crash as Cole threw his weight against it, roaring like something dragged from hell. He stumbled into the kitchen, gun up, eyes wild with smoke and the sight of his former wife and his enemy side by side, guns leveled. For a second, all three of them froze. Then everything snapped. Billy Dove left as Cole fired, the bullet grazing his arm. Clara fired back, her shot catching Cole in the leg he already favored. He screamed, dropping to one knee, gun swinging toward her. Billy lunged, slamming into Cole's shoulder, the gunshot going wide and blowing a chunk out of the wall instead. They struggled in the thickening smoke, grunting, cursing, fists and elbows and steel, all blurring together. Outside, Ezra, seeing his opening, as the back door flew open, spurred his horse closer, shouting for his men to rush the cabin, while the defenders were distracted. It might have worked if not for the distant thunder of yet more hooves, coming from the opposite direction. For a heartbeat, everyone, attackers and defenders alike, hesitated. Ezra turned, frowning. Who the hell? The new riders appeared over the low rise like ghosts at first, then solidified into a ragtag group of ranchers, a deputy or two, and a dust-coated man with a badge who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else but here. "Sheriff!" Someone in Ezra's ranks shouted, panic threading through the word. "Damn!" Ezra muttered. "Damn! Damn! Damn!" The sheriff of the nearest town, drawn by reports of two gangs and an outlaw, all converging on one lonely cabin, had finally caught up. He took in the scene at a glance: shooters in the yard, smoke from the cabin, the notorious Dust Devil's colors, and in the shadow of the doorway, just visible through the haze, the thin silhouette of a boy every wanted poster in the territory carried. His jaw tightened. "Pike!" he called. "Cole! Lay down your guns and ride out, or I swear I'll hang whatever's left of you from my town gate." Ezra laughed bitterly. "You got 10 men," he scoffed. "I got twice that. You've also got half your number bleeding in the dirt," the sheriff shot back. "You really want to make enemies of every ranch around here over one dead man's box?" Something in the crowd shifted. A few of Ezra's men glanced at each other, their loyalty to coin wrestling with their desire to stay alive and avoid a rope. The newly arrived ranchers fanned out, rifles steady, not aiming at the cabin but at the gang. Inside, Cole heard the shout of the sheriff, the rumble of more guns outside. His gaze flicked to the back door, then back to Billy, whose hands were tight around his collar. "This is your fault," Cole rasped, blood staining his teeth. "You brought all of this." "Maybe," Billy said, "but it's you they'll hang for it. Not if I take you down first." Cole spat, lunging toward the gun that had skidded across the floor. Clara moved faster. She kicked the weapon out of his reach, then leveled her rifle at his chest, hands steady, despite the smoke and the pounding in her head. "It ends here, Cole," she said. "For all of us, one way or another." He stared at her, something like disbelief flickering through the hatred. "You'd shoot me?" he sneered. "Mother of my children." "The man who broke them long before they were grown," she replied. "The man who told me I was a curse when all I did was survive him. Yes, I would." The weight of that truth hung in the air between them. For the first time, Billy saw something crack in Cole, not the dangerous kind of rage, but something smaller and sadder that had been buried under it for years. He shifted, pain and pride warring on his face. Outside, Ezra realized his men's attention was wavering. He knew when a fight was lost, even if his ego screamed otherwise. "We're pulling back," he yelled, suddenly. "This isn't worth a noose." "What about the kid?" one of his men shouted. "Let the law have him," Ezra snapped, turning his horse, fury stiff in his shoulders. "He's cursed. Everything around him burns." He dug his heels in, and the dust devils, like a wave breaking, began to retreat, some shooting wild parting shots at the cabin, just to save face, others already thinking about how far they could ride before dusk. In the confusion, one of the younger riders, half turned in his saddle, to fire heat at ditch, where he'd spotted movement, raised his rifle toward where Rosie and her brothers crouched. Cole saw it through the open back door, saw the barrel swinging toward the shadows that held his children. Without thinking, without, Billy suspected, deciding anything at all, Cole pushed himself up on one good leg, grabbed the fallen gun from the floor, and fired out the door. The shot hit the young outlaw square, knocking him out of the saddle. He crumpled, his rifle never splitting the air toward the ditch. Billy and Clara both stared at Cole, stunned. He blinked, then laughed once, a bitter, broken sound. "Don't get excited," he said, hoarsely. "Nobody shoots my children but me." It was a monstrous thing to say, but there was something twisted and genuine in the way he'd moved that neither of them could ignore. A stray bullet from outside smacked into the doorframe, showering them with splinters. Cole jerked, his body arching as red blossomed on his shirt. He staggered, the gun slipping from his hand, and fell hard onto the kitchen floor. Clara dropped to her knees instinctively, old habits tugging at her even now. Billy knelt beside her, his hand already at Cole's chest, feeling the warm, slick rush around his fingers. It didn't take a doctor to recognize the shape of the wound, the way the man's breath rattled. "Looks like you're the one going in the ground first," Billy said quietly. Cole's gaze, surprisingly clear, locked onto his. "You think this makes you better than me?" he rasped. "You with your guns and your legends?" "No," Billy said, and for once there was no bravado in his voice, only tired honesty. "I think it makes me alive, and you not." Cole coughed, blood on his lips. His eyes flicked to Clara, then to the children's hiding place beyond the door, then back. "You burned that paper," he wheezed. "You burned your claim. You burned mine too." "I did," Billy replied. "There's nothing left on paper for anyone to argue over." Cole tried to laugh and choked instead. Then maybe they got a chance," he said, jerking his chin toward the yard. "The ditch, the world outside this cursed patch of dirt, without men like us hanging over him. It was the closest thing to a blessing he could give." He sagged back, eyes going glassy. Clara's hand, still resting on his shoulder, tightened once, then loosened. "Go?" Cole whispered, his gaze finding Billy's one last time. "Sheriff sees you. He'll take his shot." "He might," Billy agreed. "Maybe he should." Cole's mouth twisted. "You gonna argue with a dying man?" he croaked. "Get out, boy. Don't make this for nothing." Then he stopped breathing. For a moment, the three of them, Clara, Billy, and the cooling body of the man who had hurt and saved in the same breath, hung in a strange suspended silence. Then Rosie's voice came from the back door, small and shaking. "Mama." Clara turned. Her daughter stood there, brothers behind her, eyes enormous. Clara rose and crossed the distance in 3 strides, wrapping all 3 children into her arms, so tightly they almost disappeared into the circle of her body. "It's over," she murmured into their hair, though she didn't know yet if it was true. "It's over." Billy pushed himself up slowly, the room tilting around him. He staggered to the front, where the yard was a mess of trampled dirt, wounded men and weary horses. The dust devils were mostly gone now, a few stragglers being rounded up by the sheriff's men. Ezra Pike was nowhere in sight. He'd slipped away in the confusion, as cowards often did. The sheriff himself stood by his horse, scanning the scene with a practiced eye. When he saw Billy step out onto the porch, recognition flickered across his face like lightning. Henry McCarty, William Bonney, Billy the Kid, wanted dead or alive in 3 territories. Here he stood, thin and bruised, smoke-streaked, the barrel of his gun pointed at the dirt. The sheriff's hand dropped to his holster, then paused. He took in the cabin, the bullet holes in the walls, the small faces peeking from behind Clara's skirts, the dead man half visible on the kitchen floor. He saw Clara step forward, placing herself just slightly between Billy and the lawman, as if her slender frame could stop a bullet. "Sheriff," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "These men came here for him, but they would have burned us all down just to make a point. He stood between them and my children." The sheriff's jaw worked. He'd hunted Billy the Kid in his head a dozen times, imagined the glory of bringing him in, or the clean certainty of shooting him down. But nothing in those stories had looked like this. An outlaw on a battered porch, a woman with a bruise on her face standing at his side, 3 children clinging to her skirt, gratitude and fear warring in their eyes. "Is that so?" he asked, more to give himself time than because he doubted her. "It is," Clara said. "Whatever he's done before, he saved us today. That has to count for something." Billy watched the sheriff's fingers flex on the grip of his gun. He didn't reach for his own. He was very aware that he was one twitch away from dying in a patch of dirt outside a cabin that had briefly felt like home. For once, he didn't feel the familiar urge to cheat fate. If this was where it ended, at least it would end with him having done something right. The sheriff exhaled, a long, slow breath. "Henry," he said, and the way he said the old name made Billy's head jerk. "You got a lot of sins in that shadow of yours." Billy swallowed. "I know. You kill Pike here?" "No," Billy said. "He ran, like men like him do." "You kill Cole?" "No," Billy answered again, glancing back toward the kitchen. "Bullet from outside did that. He died in his own mess." The sheriff studied his face, then nodded once, as if he had expected that answer. I could take you in, he said. I should. There's posters from here to Santa Fe say so. But I reckon if I do, these folks will remember me as the man who shot the boy that saved their lives instead of the one who dragged two devils off their land. He shifted in the saddle. So here's what's going to happen. I didn't see Billy the Kid today. I came here chasing Pike and Cole. I found Cole dead and Pike gone. I found a widow and her children, and a house full of smoke. Whatever else is true, that's all I'm writing down. Clara's shoulders sagged in relief so sudden she almost stumbled. Billy could only stare. Why? He asked. Because some men deserve the end the law gives them, the sheriff said. And some are already paying their tab with every mile they ride. Seems to me you've got a few more miles in you yet. Don't make me regret it. Billy swallowed hard against the tightness in his throat. I'll try not to, he said. The sheriff tilted his hat to Clara. Ma'am, he said. You need anything, you send word. I ain't saying you're safe now. Women like you never are, not really. But there's fewer snakes in the grass tonight than there were this morning. She nodded, eyes shining. The posse turned and rode off, the dust of their departure softer than that of the gangs who'd come earlier. When the last of them was a blur on the horizon, when the yard was quiet, except for the rustle of the breeze through the scrub, Billy let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding his whole life. He turned to Clara. I should go, he said. The words tasted like ash. Her head snapped up. What? As long as I'm here, trouble will sniff this place out, he said. Pike might be gone, but word about me sticks like burrs. You deserve a chance to build something that isn't under my shadow. You think your shadow wasn't already hanging over us? She asked, a sad smile touching her mouth. This world's full of men like Pike and Cole, Billy. You're not them, that's something. I'm not sure I know how to be anything but a ghost on the run, he admitted. Rosie stepped forward then, brave as ever. You could stay, she said. You could teach me to shoot, properly this time. You could help with the chickens. You could. She trailed off, looking at her mother, understanding more than a child should. Clara looked at Billy, at the thin line of him, the way the setting sun caught in his hair, turning it almost gold. She saw the road in his eyes, the way it called to him even now. She stepped close, so close he could see every fleck in her irises, every freckle the sun had kissed onto her skin. You could stay, she said, softly. But you won't, not really. Even if your boots don't move, your mind will. Men like you carry too much weight to ever stand still. He opened his mouth to protest and found he couldn't. She was right, and they both knew it. I don't want to leave you, he said, the simple truth of it surprising him. I don't either, she replied. But wanting and having are different things out here. She reached up, fingers brushing his cheek where a new bruise blossomed. He caught her hand, holding it there, leaning into the warmth like a man who'd been cold for too long. For a moment, the world shrank again, just to the space between them. Then he bent his head and kissed her. It wasn't the wild, thoughtless kiss of a boy in a saloon alley. It was slow and careful and full of all the things they couldn't say. Thank you. I'm sorry. I wish the world were different. She kissed him back with the same mixture of tenderness and ache, her hand curling in the fabric at his shoulder, as if it hurt to let go. When they finally parted, the sky was a deeper blue, scattered with the first stars. Will we ever see you again? Rosie asked, her voice small. Billy looked at her, at Tommy and Ben, at Clara. He wanted to say yes, to promise he'd ride back over that rise some evening, with a grin and a story. But he'd lied enough in his life. If the wind's kind, he said, instead. And if there's still a place for me by this fire. There will be, Clara said. No hesitation. Whether you make it back to it or not, that's between you and the bullets out there. He nodded, then reached into the leather bag one last time. The iron box was gone, burned to ash, but there were still a few coins, a folded handkerchief, and his mother's letters, scorched at the edges but readable. He pressed most of the coins into Clara's hand. For the roof, he said. For whatever you need to start again without him hanging over you. She started to protest. He closed her fingers around them gently. Please, let me do one thing for you that doesn't end in gunfire. She swallowed hard, then nodded. He took off the ring he'd pulled from Cole's stiff hand in the kitchen. A cheap band, tarnished. The one that had bound her to that man in the eyes of everyone who'd ever judged her, and laid it on the porch rail. Then at Clara's small, fierce nod, he flicked it into the dust and ground it under his heel, until it vanished. Nothing more than another speck in the endless grid of the territory. That union's dead, he said. Whatever comes next is yours to choose. She smiled at that. A real, small, luminous thing. And what about you? She asked. Who chooses for you? No one, he said. Maybe that's been my curse. Maybe it's also the only good thing I've had. I don't know. He picked up a hat from the dirt, one of Cole's men's, knocked free in the chaos, and settled it on his head, drawing it low. It wasn't his old hat, but it fit well enough. He slung the now lighter leather bag over his shoulder. At the edge of the yard, he turned back one last time. The cabin stood, scarred and stubborn, smoke still curling from a few broken boards, but it was there. Clara stood on the porch, Rosie at her side, the boys in front of her, a family battered but unbroken. You'll tell them, he said, voice carrying in the cool evening air. If anyone asks, you tell them the kid wasn't all bad. Rosie lifted her chin. I'll tell them you were the man who stood in our doorway when everyone else wanted to break it down, she called. That's the only story I'm going to tell. He smiled, a small, crooked thing. That's more than I deserve, he said. But I'll take it. Then he turned and walked out into the gathering, each step carrying him farther from the only place that had almost felt like a home since he'd left his mother's side. Somewhere down that road, he knew, another lawman waited, another bullet with his name on it, another night where his legend would grow while the truth shrank. Out here, history didn't have room for boys who bled and made mistakes and tried, sometimes, to be better. It only remembered gunfighters and ghosts. But for one long, brutal, beautiful day and night, on a patch of stubborn land under a wide New Mexico sky, Billy the Kid had been something else entirely. A man who chose someone else's safety over his own. A man who burned his own claim to give a woman and her children a chance. No history book would ever write it down. The only record would be in the way Rosie told it to her brothers on cold nights, in the way Clara sometimes stood on the porch at sunset, looking toward the horizon with a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A boy with too many ghosts stumbled onto her porch, and maybe, somewhere on the trail, in the minutes before his next fight, Billy would remember the feel of that cabin's warm light on his face, and the taste of Clara's kiss, and know that for a brief, fragile moment, he had been something more than the legend they pinned to him. For a boy who had spent his life running, that sliver of peace was worth more than all the gold in Ezra Pike's box.